this is Nathan Johanning. I'm an extension educator with the University of Illinois Extension, and I'm here today at the SIU Belleville Research Center in Belleville, Illinois, in the metro east of St. Louis, to talk about some of our trials looking at planting different clovers after soybeans at different times and the performance of those clover cover crops and a subsequent following corn crop. So here you can see we are about 3 or so weeks after planting our corn. Cover crop has been terminated, and so we're just going to go through the different treatments and what we saw in this trial. So first off, this trial mainly was composed of looking at balansa clover, which you see here in front of you. This variety, this was fixation, and then also we had crimson clover, the variety Sunrise, that was also planted, which we'll look at here in just a bit. Those are planted at 3 different planting dates, and we'll go through those as we go throughout the fall and looking at their performance and trying to evaluate the true limits, especially in southern Illinois, of when we can plant them, and if we do plant them at different timings, what is the true impact and evaluation and results of doing that. So what we're looking at right here to start with, this is actually our fixation balansa clover. This was planted on October 3rd of last year. And so now you can see we actually got a lot of biomass growth. One note with these clovers in general is that they grow very small, even through the winter and early spring. Even by the 1st of April, there was just starting to get some growth on these clovers. It didn't look like much, but now as we look here, you can see we have quite a robust amount of biomass that was produced from this planting. And this is already kind of maybe borderline on what some would expect from clover planting date, even in early October. So we got a really nice stand. It did not look like much until really the middle of April, and all of a sudden, especially balansa clover is known for coming on very strong very quickly, kind of outshaded and outcompeted other plants and really took over. It made a nice mat and really planted and performed really well. So next we have our crimson clover. This was also would have been planted October 3rd, our first planting date. Is that Sunrise crimson clover. Overall, with our crimson clover, we did not have the level of performance that I've seen in other times. I think we had a very dry fall, and then we did have a fairly abrupt switch over to very cold conditions in November, and so some of that I think has into play as far as the establishment and growth. But you still can see that we did have a nice stand of at least a scattered amount of crimson clover in this earliest planting date. But still, as you look as a compare, if we stand side by side, this is 2 different clovers planted at appropriate seeding rates. The balansa clover was planted around 5 pounds of pure live seed, and crimson clover planted at 10 pounds of pure live seed. You can see the difference that we got. So this has been the same day. We did the same action. We planted a cover crop, and here's the results we had as far as what we're planting conditions here later in the spring. So this gives you a little perspective of this part. Now we'll walk through some of our other planting dates as we go. Just as a control or check, this is a no cover crop strip, so a few winter annual weeds as to be expected that were burned down in our no-till scenario, but overall, reasonably clean. Next, we go on to our mid-October planting date, which had been October 17th in this case. You can see here that for the balansa clover, which we're looking at now, still I think a very respectable amount of growth, not the same amount of biomass you saw at that earlier planting date, but still definitely provided good residue, filled in very well, and provided good cover, which is what we look for. As we move on to the crimson clover at this later planting date, it really started to thin out. If you do look, at least there's one example, there is a little bit of crimson clover, but it starts to get really scattered. We did not get, there was some establishment, but those plants, given the winter, as you get later, as we would expect, we did not see the level of survival that we did a little bit earlier, and certainly the growth and overall performance was not what I've seen other times. So this is kind of what we're going to test, though. Part of this trial is testing and pushing the envelope to see where that goes. But again, just as a comparison between the two planting dates, just to see, if it was mid-October, on the left here we threw out balansa clover. This is what we have. Throughout crimson clover, you can see the result on the right. The last planting date was not until November the 3rd, so definitely very late. And I think the overall takeaway from both of this, as we look across both the balansa and crimson clover plots, was that we did have a little bit of balansa clover that survived. It never did produce the same amount of spring biomass or even grow as tall, even with a very thin scattered stand. The plant stayed maybe 4 or 5 inches tall and immediately wanted to bloom before they had any time to grow on any further. The crimson clover, there were maybe a few very, very scattered plants, but virtually nothing that survived under these conditions.